Hey, welcome back. This video will be a little bit quicker than the others. We're going to make our site responsive, and that's super quick and easy with Tailwind. So we'll make sure that it looks good on a variety of different devices. So first, there are a couple of little remnants from before that we need to get rid of to make sure that our site is looking good in the first place on desktop. So on the index homepage, in this header, let's go ahead and get rid of the height screen. That was in there before we had any content. And then because of that, we added some extra margin to the top of our H1. And so we can get rid of this. And so if we hit save there, you should have a site now that's looking like this, where there is some space at the bottom. And you can see too, if you scroll down because of that Z index on the little nav bar here, it does cover everything up for us. So this is looking good on desktop, but if you open up your inspector and look at it, tablet, I guess looks okay for an iPad Pro. An iPad, we're starting to get a little squished. And then if I look at like an iPhone, this is starting to look pretty bad. So let's go ahead and address some of these issues and make it look better. Let's go to our header, and on the header we can go ahead and center up the text regardless, and then we're going to add this text 3XL. So all of this stuff here is applying to this H1 right off the bat on any device. So if I look at it now, that font, it's now centered up, the text is centered up, the font size looks a little bit better. But if I open it back up to desktop, now it looks a little bit tiny. So what we can do is just right in line here, we can say on medium-sized devices, and my little IntelliSense here is telling me that this is the media query that I'm hitting. So once my device size is at least 768 pixels, then I'm going to bump up this font to 5XL. And so 5XL is the equivalent to 3rem. And so now it's centered up, it's nice, and it fits kind of that screen size. And then when I open it up, now it's nice and big again. So you might remember that before in our index CSS file, we had H1, H2, and H3. If you want to be more consistent with this across the board, you could set these font sizes in your Tailwind config file. So just adding it to the theme and doing font sizes. I'm not going to do that for now because I think that's a little bit too much for the scope of this video. But if you wanted to get a little bit more granular, you could set what 5XL is, what 3XL is, and then be consistent across the board. All right, so next, let's take a look at this first div here, where we've got width full and then flex, which defaults to flex direction of row. So that is looking at this section up top beneath our H1. So this is in a row right now, and it's doing the best it can to situate these elements nicely, but it doesn't look good. So what we can do instead is turn this into a flex column on smaller devices and then up it to flex row once we get to bigger devices. So for that, what we can do is we've got width full, we've got flex. We're going to set it initially to flex column. And then we're also going to put in items center. So if we take a look at that, now we've got our items centered up, they're stacked. We can take care of this with some spacing here in a second. So this looks a lot better on a phone, but we don't have that nice side-by-side on desktop. So this is a quick, easy fix. If we go here, we can do on large devices, which is 1024 pixels or higher, we'll do flex row. And you can, of course, play around with this. I tried medium. It didn't look great on those devices, but you can see here, now we've got the row layout. And now we've got the column layout. So let's take care of this spacing on this image real quick. If we go down to the image, right down here, we can give it a full width to start off, and then on large devices, bump it down to half. And then additionally, we can give it a little bit of breathing room by giving it padding top and bottom of 2 rem. And then when we get to large devices, we can take that padding off by putting padding 0. So now if we look at that, we've got some space here. We want to take care of these edges real quick, and we'll do that in a second. So that looks a lot better, and then if we open it back up, looks good on desktop as well. So let's take care of these spaces. So on my header class, going back up to the top, if we put padding left and right of 2 rem. So remember here we have our container. This is going to set our max width based on device sizes. However, when it's super tiny on, so this looks good like on, you know, if I have my max width of 1280 and I'm on a device that's a little bit bigger than that, if I'm looking on a screen that's a little bit wider than 1280, it's going to have a nice little natural buffer on the edges anyway. But to make sure that we don't bump up to the edges on any device, we're going to put a little bit of padding here. And so now you can see we've got those nice clean edges. If I open it up, everything looks nice and clean. Okay, so next, let's go into one of our parks. We can try arches. So this will be pretty similar. If we go into our park.js, our little template here, let's start at the top underneath about the park. On this div, we can do the same thing that we did before with our header, where we can set the initial layout to a flex column. And then when it gets to medium, we can set it to flex row. So this is right underneath about the park. You can see we've got a column layout now. And if we open it up, now it's back to a row. Let's take care next of this section to make sure that it's taking up a little bit more space and looks a little bit more natural. So in our image right now, we've got a width of 64. Let's start off with a width of 32, and then when we get to a medium-sized device, we can bump it up to 64. Similarly, we can not even put a width on this paragraph tag until we get to a medium-sized device. We'll put padding top and bottom of 2 rem or PY8, and then when we get to medium-sized devices, we'll do padding top and bottom of 0. Okay, so we ran into the same issue with the edges here. However, you can see that it looks a lot cleaner with this smaller image. The text is taking up an appropriate amount of space. And then if we put it back to desktop, you can see it still looks nice. So let's take care of those edges real quick. If we go to this section here, instead of just having padding top and bottom of 8, let's do a padding of 8 so it'll be all sides. And then same thing with this section as well. So now we've got the little nice space along the edges. Next, let's take care of that second section. So on our div underneath getting here, we are going to set an initial flex direction of column reverse. And then when we get to medium, we'll do flex row. So now for this, what we did is we kept some consistency where we have our header, image, text by doing a column reverse. But then When we go to desktop, we have the flipped order in the same order as our divs and our images and everything set up nicely. So if we go back here, we can see some similar issues where we need to address our image and our text. So for this div here, we can give it just at medium, we'll bump it down to half width for the paragraph and anchor tag that's talking about the directions and then the link to the directions. And then same thing for our image. We can do width of 32 and then at medium, bump it up to 64. That's looking pretty good. We can probably do something with this image here as well. So let's do that and just mimic the same sort of setup that we had above. So we have padding top and bottom of 8. Let's do the same thing for all of our text here as well, where we get rid of it at medium-sized devices. All right, that's looking a lot more clean. You could potentially set up this directions into the center. Actually, let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we'll do text center, and then medium, we'll do text text left. Let's do a block on this as well. Cool. So display block, instead of having it inline, we've got it blocked so we can center it up. And then here it's back to the left. So with Tailwind, it's really easy to get these things up and running. And then just with a few extra lines of code, you can make your all of your screens look consistent and clean, no matter what size device that you've got, no matter what size monitor that you've got. Your website can look consistent and clean across the board. So this one was pretty quick. In our next and final video, what we'll be doing is actually getting this site up and deployed for the world to see using Firebase. So we'll use Firebase hosting to get this up and running. You'll get a domain through Firebase and be able to show off your work to anybody that wants to see it. So thanks for hanging out in this one, and until next time, have a good one.